I want to invite Pereg. So in March of this year, we started collaborating with Polylabs. Polylabs was created by Pereg, who's been our amazing partner ever since then. And, oh, I can do this. Oh, there we go. There's Bar. And the reason we decided to partner with Bar for this discussion's purpose is because Bar is bringing with her, from all her years of experience, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you don't need to see my emails.
We don't see anything else.
Oh, good. Because it's my emails. There we go. The tool of future thinking. So the tool, and I'm new to the tool of future thinking, but I'm learning from Bar a lot. And the reason, then the things that I'm learning is that future thinking helps us reimagine what can be. Therefore, it helps us just move on from whatever is stucking us in the present. It allows us to better prepare for the future, better prepare for the risks and opportunities that come with it. And is it working? Is it not working? Because we do need that. It gives us perspective of the present and really marches us toward the plausible future scenarios. So I want to invite Bar. Bar is the founder and CEO of Polylabs, and she's going to take us into the discussions that you're going to have in your different tables. But before we dive into that, we need to really understand where is she coming from, what is the thought process, and what are the tools of future thinking. This is very exciting, actually, because this is the first time that we're trying it. Up until now, the roundtable discussions were discussions with different questions, but now we're actually going to try and do something else because we want this room, the leaders of the Jewish American community, to pave the way toward that unity and what it might look like. Bar, please.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you hear my voice? Well, it's pretty protected. So two things before we start is a bit of a heads up. One, we are going to talk about the future. We're going to make assumption that there is a future. So we're not going to talk about the past. And by doing so, we're not forgetting or leaving behind the pain. And sometimes it's a bit hard. Some of us are shaking off the last wave of bad news. And I just want to recognize that moving forward, it's not without recognizing the past. The second thing I want to recognize, and Yakir here from the IAC is reminding me, this is not an easy exercise. Going through the future and doing what we are about to do together is a very taxing request from you all. Taxing of your time, on your intellectual capacity, and your emotional stress. There is a reason why people don't do future thinking automatically, because it's sometimes uncomfortable. So I just want to recognize this and thank you. And I want to start with, does anyone here ever heard about the Moflan scenarios in South Africa, just by the raise of hand? Okay, so imagine South Africa in the early 90s, Mandela just was released from jail, the apartheid system is crumbling. There is a lot of division in South Africa. Many people still believe that race is a legitimate way to discriminate, and the economy takes a hit, violence everywhere. In this problematic setup, a group of 20 individuals from the diverse parts of the political, academics, union, etc., come together to try to imagine a future for South Africa, a future that is plausible. And they sit together, and what they do through a series of exercise, they craft 4 possible future of South Africa. These are not the best type scenarios. These are just like, what is possible? Let's just play it forward. This exercise resulted in 4 scenarios that everyone agreed are plausible. They named them by 4 names representing their story. I'm not going to get into it, but one scenario in particular, the flight of like flamingo, was an inspiration for the growth, the inclusive growth of South Africa. And what's something really interesting happened in these rooms, former adversaries, people that did not agree, all of a sudden had a shared common understanding of what the future may look like. Those shared fear and risk were like really real, and it doesn't matter what you believe in, it was still scary. So they all of a sudden were able to agree that a better future is needed, is possible, and actually, if we work together, it can happen. Now, these scenarios had tremendous impact on South Africa. It was socialized extensively, it was adopted, and the words of the scenarios are showed up in policy papers. Flamingo became a term for the inclusive economy of South Africa, and the next decade of South Africa was a real rise against a pretty shaky situation to start with. Maybe one of the most pronounced success factors, like transitions of power, democracies, election after election, in a world where the juristical system was in risk, right? So, reminding a bit of a situation that we're all familiar with. What's so interesting is that the team of the project has created a vision in a very dire time, and what have happened is that the actual South Africa government have rised to see this shared vision. But as Lital said, this is not a regular time of let's just have a shared vision, right? We're in a time of really aggressive uncertainties, so it's not easy to build a shared vision. Now, these scenario projects are, I was not aware of them in October 2023. I live in Brooklyn, I'm Israeli, I'm the new American, like Shira called it, and in October 7th, I, with everyone, was in this mindset of what's actually going on. And it was, I don't need to tell you what it was. Also, in October 7th, was this unbelievable, everyone doing everything, right? Everyone. As I found myself mobilizing tactic gear and sending bandages out of my Brooklyn apartment, I realized that everybody want to help. I want to help, but we are so emotional. We're so foggy. There is no way we are making good decisions. And in our experience at Polylabs, we know that after disasters, there's basically 3 phases. There is the shock and the response to the shock. And then there's a recovery phase. And then after the recovery, there is thriving, surviving, or not really. And this recovery phase that comes after the response is really important to make good decisions because the system is malleable, it's fluid, things are possible. And if you don't make good decisions, that's a waste of opportunity. And I don't think any of us were in a really great place to make a fantastic decision on October 11. So I was needing some kind of a tool and a framework, an organization, and that's why we turned to scenario. And not because of the South Africa example, but because of my experience from Deloitte. A couple of years before, or 3 years before, in COVID, I was working as a management consultant at Deloitte, and when COVID hit, it was confusing. And the world has changed, and executive and Fortune 500 companies were going all different directions, and everybody wanted to respond for the employees and the market, et cetera. And it was really hard to be a trusted strategic advisor as a Deloitte consultant. So we at Deloitte, we released those future scenarios, similar methodology to the one I've created, and what it did was really interesting. All of a sudden, there was a shared understanding of what the future may look like, so executive teams could navigate possibilities. So it was still messy, it was still uncomfortable, but at least we had a language. Going back to Shira's point, we had some shared understanding, and now we can think about goals. So with this kind of the clarity and confidence that the Deloitte scenario have created was what I had imagined when we pulled our team and we got Deloitte practitioners to help us with creating our future scenarios. And before I'm going to present the future scenarios, and I'm going to send you off to work on something similar, I want to give 2 minutes on the logic behind future thinking. Future thinking is a way to think about what's coming that is different than traditional forecasting, right? When I'm thinking about what's going to be the weather, I'm going well, what was the weather yesterday? What's usually the weather? 10% here or there. Future thinking is recognizing that we're in a time of extreme uncertainties. We cannot use what we know to project the future. We need to identify those unknowns and codify it to possibilities. And while there is endless possibility for the future, with good synthesis, we can think about a small number of futures that represent what may happen. Scenarios helping us to do two things. They help us to prepare for the future, the different scenarios, like to really understand the risks and opportunities. And they also help us identify if there's anything we can do to influence the course of the future. And that's a very powerful thing. It's important to make it clear that scenarios are not prediction or probabilities. It's not like science fiction. It's just a synthesis of what's possible. It creates narratives that we work on. Think about 4 different movies I'm going to show you now. And with these movies, you can navigate. So back to October 2023, right? We're deciding that we're doing scenarios. It's 3 weeks after October 7th. And when Tel Aviv is still attacked, we have gathered 50 people for a series of conversation about what the future of Israel may look like. And these people are representing all sides of the aisle, different types of population. Not all of them agreed to be represented in name. Former chief of staff of the IDF, economists, you name it. And it's really important to understand that the question that we ask ourselves is, what does the future of Israel look like in the next 12 to 18 months? And we chose this question because, mind you, October, all we care about is like how to help, right? What do we do now that is valuable later, right? And it's not the question we're asking today. It's the question we asked yet. And that resulted in the report, the Israel Turning Point, that we released in December, early December. And the highlights, or the most important point, is that Israel's future, the short-term future, really depends on 2 critical uncertainties. What's going to be the escalation of the conflict, and what will be the degree of internal unity in Israel? And when we say internal unity, it's the efficiency of the government, and it's the social cohesion of the people. And if you think about those 2 uncertainties, you can actually create a 2x2. And think about 4 different futures, each of them presenting those uncertainties in a different way. I'm going to go through these really quickly. You have the report, and we can send it. But the best case scenario was obviously a case where the conflict is contained. We get a ceasefire pretty soon, and internal stability remain high, which means that after the ceasefire, there is a unity, we're doing it together, is a mandate by the people for the government to govern, etc. The other scenario, the storm behind the storm, assumed that the conflict has been contained, but instead of unity sentiment, there is a division, a blame game. Who is to be blamed? How should we allocate resources, protest, etc.? The third one, strength under pressure, assumed that there is an escalation in the conflict, but we remain united. And by we, it's largely the Jewish population in Israel and the American Jews, because the severity of the attack is so profound. And the last one is fueling the fire, which is basically the worst case scenario. The conflict is not contained over time. We're in a drag-along state of war. There is internal conflict and fights. And the positioning of Israel is deteriorating. That was December of 2023. What we've created for each of these scenarios, like deep dives and explanation, and it was really, really valuable for us to understand where we're going at the short term. It also helped us understand a set of insights that are not scenario specific. So if you think about it, like if you think of all the possible futures and you identify things that are true for all of the scenarios, it's universal truth. It's not uncertainty, right? If it's true for every single scenario. So it gives this island of clarity of like, okay, not everything is unknown. Some things are known. We can work with this. Out of this, we developed 4 insights that we shared with whoever was willing to listen. And one is that real recovery requires restructure. Like, there's not going to be back to October 6th. We need to understand that we need to build something new. The third one, I'm keeping the integrity of the order, is that under this paradigms and how we do things, there's not going to be enough resources to meet all the needs of building back Israel. And by the way, based on this insight, we have decided how to build our Israel program. The fourth one is that we're going to navigate uncertainty for the foreseeable future, right? It was 10 months ago. I did not imagine, frankly, that we will still be where we are. But even then, it was clear that we're heading to a long term of uncertainty. So we need to develop the internal capability of dealing with uncertainties. And the second insight there was that social cohesion was a top priority for everyone. And the reason we're saying it, and it's very much echoing the sentiment of what both Lan and Shira said, is that social cohesion is our only lever when we're thinking about how we're moving through the future. Like, let's just imagine, for example, that the conflict was contained in December of 2023. We would still have gone to a blame game. We see it now, right? So us as philanthropists, as organizations, we don't control the conflict and we don't control the government. We get to have a say about social cohesion if we play our cards right. So that was kind of like the insight that we left off. And the impact of this report have been quite profound in the people that it reached and the organization that it helped serve. I see here like faces from lectures and conversation, including the conversation we had in the IAC. We got really great notes about people that are using it from both sides of the political aisle, like, oh, we're using it, it's really helpful, thank you, etc. But the problem is that this value of scenario also gave us the very kavod mefukpak, how do you say it, dubious honor, to ask today, where are we now? 10 months later, after we predicted the future, where are we now? And where are we now is that the unknowns are still unknowns. We still don't know what's going to be the conflict extent, and we still don't know how bad is our internal stability. We don't know. We also know that the scope of the concern that we had 10 months ago have extended to the entire Jewish community. That was not the case in November of 2023. We then also know that social cohesion that used to be the most important lever then is still the most important lever, which is why this conversation today is about unity. I hate to say it, though. We are also just walking straight into the worst case scenario. And it's actually pretty rare in scenario work that it's so clear which scenario comes up. It's usually like a mesh. But 12 months, 10 months later, it's literally the things we wrote and predicted as really bad if it happened are happening now. So this report was helpful as an organizational tool to prep our organization to the future, but we just got a first line into the future in its worst form. And that's not what we want. So IAC, when we met them in March, they were smart enough to ask, like, well, but how do we prep for the future and change the future collectively? Not as an organization, but as a convener of many organizations. And that's what we're doing here today. The question is, like, what does it take to influence the future, right? How do you do what needs to be done? And basically 3 things needs to happen. You need to have many people from across different ways of life committing to work toward it. The commitment is the first step. The second is that we need to develop a shared understanding of what the future may look like. And not from a political who wins, who loses, but like what actually can happen, good and bad. What are the pitfalls that we are collectively are trying to avoid, and what are the really great stuff that we are trying to create? And then we need to make choices toward this future. And it's just not one organization. It's just not possible that one organization can do it, which is why this opportunity and you all are being called today to start configuring this future. Today's success, to be very clear and specific, is 2 things. We want to start a beginning of a thoughtful journey that will create a shared understanding of what the future may look like so we all can make better choices in our organization, but also a shared understanding of what the future can look like for all of us. Secondly, we want to find some tachlis. We want to leave here with some quick wins, right? Because this process is going to take long time, and we need to show and we need to start practice our choice making. So your very competent facilitators are going to take you through this process today. They're going to take you through a process of start time traveling, understanding what the future may look like, identifying risks and opportunities, talking about what is known, what is not a question, but it's known that it's going to be the future. And then we're going to talk about unity and how are we starting to work toward this unity that we need to accomplish. Before I'm going to let you go, I want to share something a bit personal. So I did not introduce myself or my organization at the beginning because what we do is not really that relevant, right? I decided to dedicate my life to making sure that technology and the power of private sectors are working in favor of the most vulnerable people in the world, right? So this is not what we do. We're not a geopolitical tank. Polylabs is a venture incubator and a think tank that works on technology. But as part of my work and spending 15 years kind of like thinking about social challenges, I got to work with people from Sudan and Afghanistan and hear their story about their countries going to places that they don't want to go. And then two things comes to mind. A, this situation that we're at now is not as bad as it can be. It can be much, much worse. And second, it's kind of on us now. So saying like, oh, this is kind of not my thing, is just not really an option. I also had a chance to work with people from Rwanda, though, a country that saw civil war so violent and so divisive, and that is now for years on a path for recovery. So we know it's possible, right? We know it's hard, but we know it's possible. So my request for you and the intention I'm asking you to set is take a deep breath. It's not fun to think about the future always, but also try to put aside the agenda, the strategy, the purpose of your organization now, or the political affiliation, and try to think about the future as a collective form. And I'm going to leave you with this quote from a famous South African futurist who wrote in one of the analysis of the scenario exercise I told you in the beginning. Right? A group of people sat down to write the future of South Africa and influenced people from right and left to rise to this vision. We're not going to do this today. We're not even as ambitious as we can be, but we want to start walking toward this path. So thank you for the time. Thank you for your facilitators. We're going to hand it over to them for conversation in the tables, and we're going to come back to the plenary afterwards.